Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Harry T. Stone presiding. This is On Trial, brought to you by the Radulich Broadcasting Network. And tonight I am your defense attorney, the mandated reporter, and frankly I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And on the docket, M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong's Unbreakable. Unbeknownst to those of the time, even to M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong, the beginning of the East Rail 177 trilogy, which was then followed by Split, which was then followed by Glass, which was then followed by me wanting to throw bottles at the screen. But more on that Tuesday. Prosecuting tonight, of course, is my partner in crime, the inimitable Sean Comer. You're not. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, my lovely jet bears. I'm Sean. You're not. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but I just love you guys that much to come on here and try to, bit by bit, dissect one of my very favorite movies. This is going to hurt.
So I have to... First, some housekeeping. You might be wondering, hey, what happened to the On Trial for Judgment Night? We had a schedule.
Sean fucked up. That's what happened.
Okay, Sean fucked up. Sean don't know how to read a schedule, and and so Judgment Night. So as what happens in real life courtrooms when the prosecutor does not, the person who is prosecuting, not the actual attorney, but the person who has brought charges, does not show up for court, then the accused is declared not guilty and released on their own recognizance. So, Judgment Night walks free amongst us. God bless America. But with this being the weekend that Glass has been released, and damn you Hollywood reviewing it, we thought, hey, let's not just let all of January go by and do nothing. Why don't we call an audible? And I saw Unbreakable when it first came out on video many years ago, proceeded to fall asleep through the whole damn thing and remember none of it. So I thought, okay, I'll rewatch this thing again and give it the old college try, and we'll put it on the docket and see how that goes. Sean loves it. I fucking hated it. He's going to prosecute it. I'm going to defend it. It's a mixed up mix of a world, Alice. Up is down, left is right, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. With that said...
I'm starting to think we need to add Ghostbusters, that particular Ghostbusters reference to the drinking game for the number of times we need to it.
Indeed. All right, Sean, I hear you have notes. Play your favorite tune, Daddy-O.
Well, believe it or not, there was a time, a long time ago, I can sure remember...
Fuck you, I was just thinking that. This here Jedi and I... God.
When M. Night Shyamalan had not yet kind of outed himself as the one-punch wonder we know him as today. Somebody who had only ever made one truly unbelievably great movie. And yes, I am saying that although I love this movie, it is not perfect. I will freely say the only one that stands up as nearly unimpeachable in his entire filmography is The Sixth Sense.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's the only time he has ever just nailed it, beat for beat. But there was a time when we had no idea the melange of sameness that kind of awaited us. And it was right around the time that Unbreakable hit theaters. This was only his second major studio feature. I point that out because he, of course, made, I forget the name of it, but it was an indie effort that he made in, I believe, his native India before The Sixth Sense. For the life of me, can't remember what it's called. But if The Sixth Sense was his effort at taking the classic suspenseful ghost story into kind of fresh territory and trying to put an original spin on it, this was him putting the superhero origin formula under the knife and really dissecting it. It's kind of a meta superhero movie, and one that isn't quite as heavy-handed with its message as, say, Watchmen. It's not as over-the-top, ridiculous, and kind of admittedly vulgar as Kick-Ass and Kick-Ass 2. You know, it was experimental. It reunited him with Bruce Willis after, you know, The Sixth Sense gave Willis's career a nice stiff shot of adrenaline, complete with an Oscar nomination. It paired him for the first time with Samuel L. Jackson. Let's go ahead and round out the cast with the likes of Robin Wright as the wife of Bruce Willis's David Dunn. And all of a sudden, you got yourself a stew going. You know, it was kind of conceived as a take on a comic book's ordinary three-part structure. You know, the birth, struggling against evildoers, and ultimately meet the hero meeting his arch enemy. But Shyamalan chose to focus almost entirely on the birth section. He had already kind of broached the idea to Bruce Willis during the filming of Unbreakable. He had Samuel L. Jackson specifically in mind as the co-lead when he was writing the characters. It started off as a spec script during the Sixth Sense post-production. And, you know, once the Sixth Sense made massive, just ridiculous, obscene, make you stupid bank at the box office in August 1999, he decided to give the first look at the script to Walt Disney Studios. In return, he made a cool $5 million when Disney purposed the screenplay, at the time a record for spec scripts. He got another $5 million to direct, and Disney decided to release it under Touchstone. This was the movie that helped to further build the foundation of Shyamalan's Blinding Edge Pictures production company. It wasn't without its difficulties. At one point, Julianne Moore, the original actress tapped to play David's wife, Audrey, dropped out so that she could play, of all parts, Clarice Starling in Hannibal. That was where Robin Wright was able to step in. Was mostly filmed on location in Philadelphia and shot in such a way that it kind of mimicked a comic book as closely as possible, which was a decision that I'll discuss at length. Well, not really at length, but as clearly and succinctly as I can, fairly short. They don't want to give you the indication that, you know, the old Sean is coming back. The one who absolutely murdered Mark's concept of how long his podcasts need to be. You know, there are some times where there's some nice artistic choices, and there are others when M. Night Shyamalan has got about all the subtleness of a kick square in the daddy bag. But it was released pretty much essentially as M. Night Shyamalan intended. There's more than 15 minutes of footage deleted, which is available on the DVD release. None of it, I think, that really alters the finished product all that much. I apologize for a lot of the swallowing. I've got this sore on the inside of my mouth that's making it kind of painful to talk. So, also if I'm a little bit quiet, that's why. Ultimately, though, you can't argue with the numbers. You really can't. On a budget of $75 million at the box office, it drew $248.1 million, even despite a somewhat lengthy for its structure 106-minute running time. Released on November 22nd, 2000, to largely positive reviews, mostly for its aesthetic choices, the performances of Willis and Jackson, and James Newton Howard's tense underlying score. Gained a pretty solid cult following, enough so that, as Mark pointed out, it generated not one but two direct sequels, Split and the recently released Glass. Time listed it in 2011 as, believe it or not, one of the top 10 superhero films of all time. In fact, it came in number 4. Gotta think that's probably fallen off the rankings a little ways since the explosion of the MCU, and to a vastly lesser extent, the DCEU. And Quentin Tarantino considers it one of the top 20 films released since 1992. So that's saying quite a bit, both considering the director stating the opinion and just which movies he's considering among that list. So, with that being said, Mark, how about you take us through this 3-act play?
Alrighty, 1961. Our Samuel L. Jackson playing Elijah Prince, and Elijah Prince is born. Unfortunately, the little tyke is born with type 1 osteogenesis imperfecta, a brittle bone disease. Bones are extremely fragile and prone to fracture, and as a matter of fact, upon being born, I think his legs are broken. He grows up to become a comic book art dealer, and he develops a theory that what goes up must come down. If there is a left, there must be a right, and if there is a most fragile man, then there must be a most strongest unbreakable man. Which brings us to David Dunn, played by Bruce Willis. He's sad, and he's on a train, and that train gets derailed, and everyone dies, all 131 passengers, except for him. Along the way, he meets Elijah Prince, who has sought him out, and Elijah Prince convinces him that he isn't just lucky, he actually has superpowers, unbreakable skin, and he'll come to find out that he also has extra sensory perception. He can touch people and see their crimes. And he also comes to realize about himself that not only does he have a fear of water, but as Elijah Prince describes it, it is his weakness. It is his kryptonite. He continues to push himself more and more and test himself, and eventually he gets to deciding he's going to try out his powers in public, and he finds a janitor who has committed a home invasion. This is my favorite part of the movie, actually. I like your house. Can I come in? No? The janitor commits the home invasion, kills the father, ties up the mother and children, and proceeds to live in the house, Bruce Willis dons a green poncho, which is his superhero color, and he goes to save the family. He ends up killing the janitor after a near-death experience himself when the janitor pushed him off the balcony into the pool. But he is saved by the children. He goes back in, saves the mom, kills the home invader, goes home, makes up with his estranged wife, and his son comes to... what's the word? Lordy. His son comes to think he's wonderful, think he's a superhero, and he's going to keep his identity, thinks this is just the greatest thing. So, back at Elijah Prince's art gallery, David comes to see him, and Elijah Prince reveals that he is the one who derailed the train and has committed several other acts of terrorism. And he did these things so that he could essentially find the needle in a haystack by burning down the haystack. Creating these situations where he who survives must be his archenemy, must be the Unbreakable Man. Bruce Willis is more sad and slightly horrified. He calls the police. The police come and take Elijah Prince away, and he is committed to a psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane. That's this movie in a nutshell, as near as I can tell. I will allow the prosecution to make their case.
Thank you. Prior to this, in The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan displayed a willingness to give his audience the benefit of a doubt, to actually respect their intelligence. Unbreakable does absolutely nothing of the sort. On the other hand, this movie insists on treating its audience like dim-witted toddlers. The foreshadowing is so constant, so glaring, and so indicative that Shyamalan obviously thought he was being clever, that it just leaves nothing to the imagination, nothing to be thought out, like the clearly adhered to rules in his first major success. We get it. We get a scene. It kind of expels a little bit of information, and then in the very next scene, we're just clanged over the head with the causality of the actual event, just so absolutely positively nothing can in any way be misunderstood. Just none of it, nothing whatsoever. There's nothing to really get your brain working. And along the way, the other problem with this is the fact that, again, I'm going to make the comparison because sometimes the best way to establish why something doesn't work is to compare it to something else of a similar vein that clearly did. In The Sixth Sense, we were repeatedly given reasons and opportunities to invest in the main characters, in particular the ones played by Bruce Willis and Haley Joel Osment. We're given reasons to sympathize with them, to understand them, to invest ourselves and commit to the emotions they were trying to carry off from one scene to the next. It's established through conversation, through simple interactions, through scenes that have nothing to do with actually seeing dead people. There's nothing of the kind here. We are given no reason to give just a squiddling shit about David or Mr. Glass throughout most of this movie. You know, there is no occasion in which we're led to believe that David somehow deserves the powers that he's been given. You know, there is no Peter Parker moment or a kind of Tony Stark epiphany in which we understand how this call to action is truly changing his life for the better, where there's a clear discernment between who he was before and who he is upon accepting his powers, and accepting the great responsibility that comes with those great powers. There's just nothing there. And that's and that's a big reason why this barely feels like a movie. There is no plot to speak of here. None. There is no true conflict in which we can truly anticipate at some point and have paid off a valid kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, worthy confrontation between hero and villain, where they clash continuously throughout the movie and are on an obvious collision course. What this is it's a 106-minute character study. That's all. And that's the problem with making a movie that is all origin story instead of having a proper 3-act structure. It is incredibly dull. It has its interesting moments. It has interesting beats. The very barest DNA of something compelling. But the problem is we're being spoon-fed every dimension of the characters so obviously and so forcefully that it's the first thing that takes us right out of the movie entirely. The very next being the way it actually looks. It was a clear choice to try to give the movie as much of the feel of a comic book as possible with the way that it was shot. And to a certain extent, I can appreciate it. On a purely visual level, it is kind of dazzling. It's artsy, but ultimately it detracts from the storytelling. It doesn't add to it because it further eradicates your suspension of disbelief. It constantly reminds you you're watching a movie, unlike The Sixth Sense, which just allowed you to simply lose yourself in the surroundings, in the performances, in the tension. Well, frankly, as a brief aside, the tension which often in this movie, too often, given its running time, is entirely non-existent. There's very little that actually ratchets up the feeling of stakes in any one scene. One of the ones that comes maybe closest to it is the absolutely moronic scene when David's son pulls a freaking gun on him and threatens to shoot him, and somehow this kid is not immediately committed thereafter. I don't care that we know that David is, for all intents and purposes, invulnerable. The fact is, the characters largely don't know this. David's wife should be having that kid whisked away in the nearest armored ambulance in a straitjacket after that. And yet, nothing. This is treated like treated by them like it's almost like just some kind of weird childhood quirk that they've got to work through. Almost, it feels almost like they're thinking it's something that he'll just grow out of. He pulled a gun on you. He was gonna bust a cap in yo ass. That kid needs to be sealed away until we are absolutely 100% certainly certain we don't have a Michael Myers thing going on. And while we're talking about things that take away from suspension of disbelief, okay, just so I'm 100% clear on this, I'm supposed to believe that a man has lived into his, we're going to presume to say, what, his 40s or so, late 30s, early 40s, and he has never noticed that he's never been even slightly injured, has never been sick. His health has never been jeopardized except for the fact that he's a shitty swimmer. At the point of midlife, that wouldn't strike you as a little bit odd. That wouldn't stand out to you pretty much every single day, that you've never had so much as a skin knee, not so much as a sniffle. You never had the chicken pox. You know, you never fell off a bike and broke your arm. The man played college football. College fucking football. And given his age, we can presume he played it when steroids were very much a thing at high levels of sport. And he never got hurt. Concussion, wind knocked out of him, twisted ankle, dislocated finger. None of that. Bullshit. You just absolutely murdered any idea or any faint chance that I would be able to kind of just let things slide, say, okay, this could happen. And of all people, his wife, you know, love, honor, obey, sickness, and in health, never notices that somehow the sickness part never came into play. Never had to nurse him through a case of man flu. Yeah. No, that's bordering on a glaring plot hole.
Objection, Your Honor. There. Women don't pay attention to men suffering.
I want to say sustained, but then I know there's a chance Carrie might hear this.
Oh, don't shy away from being, from your natural instinct. This is the Rattlegion Broadcasting Network, where our new tagline is, we're looking forward to offending you in the future. Just go with it.
I didn't realize that was the new tagline.
It sure is.
I will give Unbreakable credit. It was ambitious. It wanted to do something different. It wanted to take a genre to artistic places it had never been, so that the genre could be maybe taken seriously as true art. Because let's keep in mind, when it came to the superhero genre, at this point in 2000, the beacons of the entire style were the first two Superman movies, the Batman franchise, specifically the first 1989 Tim Burton Batman. just for grins, we could throw Blade in there. But let's see. By this point, and let's see, when did it come out again?
2000.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the exact date though because I'm trying to tell if X-Men came out before or after.
November 22nd.
Okay, and the first X-Men movie came out. When? Scroll down. Crap, gotta actually do more clicking here.
I'll find it. You keep going.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it came out around the same time as X-Men, which was the movie that demonstrated the future commercial viability of films based on comics.
Pardon me. Earlier that year.
Okay, so it shortly followed X-Men. It preceded Sam Raimi's initial Spider-Man, but keep in mind all of this came after such attempts as Spawn and Tank Girl and Judge Dredd and the very first Punisher. I mean, all these movies that truly pigeonholed the genre into a place that it didn't seem destined to emerge from. And it was noble that he wanted to take this and really truly go a cerebral route. However, what we ultimately ended up with was a movie that would have been much better pitched as a really outstanding graphic novel. The floor is yours.
This past year or so, we had a Star Wars movie where the director, Rian Johnson, sought to subvert expectations. There's a reason why directors, writers, artists do that. There tends to be patterns and tropes, certain genres, where they make money, they're successful, but they aren't really challenging the genre in any way. You know, the Marvel formula, and it is a formula, works well. It makes a lot of money. Obviously, it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise. It's so popular that other companies have either tried to copy it outright or run away from it and do their own thing, only to find utter failure, and then having to have to bring themselves around to copying the formula, because the object at the end of the day is to make money. Whether or not M. Night Shyamalan's movies make money is sort of beyond the point. M. Night Shyamalan is one of those directors that goes out of his way to challenge genres, tropes, and subvert expectations. That is the success of Unbreakable. It takes the standard superhero flick, for which we are all now very familiar with. My children are familiar with the patterns of these movies, okay? We all know them. We love them to one degree or another. Even in 2000, though, M. Night Shyamalan obviously realized that there were other places that you could go. Now, I'm not saying these necessarily were always going to be entertaining, but I think, you have to, if you want to create an omelet, you have to break a few eggs. Speaking of Unbreakable. And I think where Unbreakable is very successful is that it challenges the standard superhero structure, the origin story structure, for which I have heard people time and again say it bores them to tears. So, if this were Unbreakable brought to you by Marvel, David Dunn would be a lovable loser, who, when he discovers he has powers after the derailment, would have a montage of experimenting with his powers set to popular music, and then Mr. Glass would unveil his next great terroristic scheme, for which David would then try to stop, the Overseer, or whatever he's called in this movie, would then try to stop him, and much like a Batman villain from the 60s, Mr. Glass would have had, some sort of device cooked up or contraption for which David will have fallen into some sort of tank of water, and he would have escaped from it, and he would get to Mr. Glass in the ta-da nick of time and foil the whole thing, and he would stand triumphantly and people would cheer. You get none of that with this movie. None of it. In a lot of ways, the prosecution said, this isn't believable, this isn't believable. I would contend to believe that this is actually more believable than any of the Marvel superhero stories in how David reacts to things. Remember, this is, in spirit, a broken man. He may have unbreakable bones and unbreakable skin, but his spirit, his zest for life, is utterly shattered. By contrast, you have Mr. Glass, whose bones are brittle and is in a wheelchair, but has this hunger, has this zest for life. He has a purpose. His purpose is to be the arch villain to someone's hero, which is an interesting take on the superhero trope. I'm not promising it's entertaining. I'm just saying it's there, and it's interesting, and it's something I don't think anyone else has ever done before. Kick-Ass was brought up. Again, the idea of ordinary people becoming extraordinary and, sort of having a playing around with the superhero genres. But even then, fun music, hip characters we can jive with and are entertained by. There's nothing entertaining about David Dunn. Nothing. This is the driest, most boring, most sad performance, if you want to call it that. I'm convinced they just gave Bruce Willis Quaaludes and fed him dialogue. Maybe, because there isn't that much of it. It might have just been Quaaludes and then they shoved him in front of a camera. Either way, that subverts the typical hero trope. Because all of our heroes, from Spider-Man to Wolverine to Captain America to Iron Man to Thor, to even the deep, dark, brooding, everyone's from Gotham, DC Extended Universe characters, have charisma. Charisma for days. Even Superman from Man of Steel at least had some charisma, or at least he found his charisma in Justice League. David has none. That's amazing. An entire film where your lead is a black hole of charisma. That's taking the genre and turning it on its head. That's art. Is it art for art's sake? Who can say? That's up for you to decide. But you can't deny that that's an interesting take. Let's have a lead that puts the audience to sleep. Let's have a lead that has zero zest for what he's doing and is almost sleepwalking through it. Let's have the only one in this movie with even a little bit of charisma be the villain. Now, that happens a lot. We've definitely found in many of these movies that sometimes the villain outshines the hero. Jack Nicholson's Joker, for example. To one degree or another, the Green Goblin and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Depending on what your feelings on that particular Spider-Man were. Many times the villains in these movies are the ones carrying the ball. Many times they're not. Robert Downey Jr. sucks up all the charisma in every movie that he's in and leaves none for nobody. Certainly not Jeff Bridges, Ironmonger, or Whiplash. They don't necessarily outshine the hero in those movies. But in this one, just the fact that Samuel L. Jackson was awake, he outshines Bruce Willis. One of the other things that really works about this movie, and again, turns the whole genre on its head, and it goes to the idea that I was getting to before about, well, this is believable, is that not everybody is from Gotham. Sorry. Not everybody who might get superpowers wants them and would struggle with what to do with them. They might consider themselves to be a freak, abnormal, whatever. They wouldn't necessarily go, first thought is go running into the street to stop crime. So it's entirely believable that David would have to be pushed to that, especially as broken as he is. And it's a phenomenal thing to have these kinds of powers, to even believe that they exist. So yeah, it would take a lot of convincing and a lot of pushing. The prosecution brought up, how do you get to your mid-40s and never notice you've been sick? And again, I objected to that, saying women don't pay attention to men's needs or wants at all, ever. So it's entirely believable that the wife would never have noticed. Whether or not he would notice, I don't know. Life is busy, especially when you have kids. You have things going on. I don't stop to think about... Listen, when I was healthy, I didn't stop to think about how healthy I was. I was just busy living life. He didn't get injured on the football field? Okay. Do you really stop and think about those things unless someone points it out to you? Which they do in this movie. It points out, hey, ever think about the fact that you've never been sick? You've never been injured? And what that might mean? Huh. Never thought about it before. Absolutely believable. Life has too much going on with it to focus on things that don't necessarily obstruct your path. There is an artsy, avant-garde dreariness to this film. Its muted colors, its constant rains, the fact that everyone delivers their dialogue in sort of a whisper, mumbling effort, that most of the cast, and especially Bruce Willis and Robin Wright, look dead in the eyes, that the son seems to be channeling Haley Joel Osment's character from The Sixth Sense in every reaction that he has. There's something to that. There's this hey, you know how superheroes are brightly lit and colorful and really jump off the screen to Aquaman, okay? The latest example of a place that takes you to another world, really just surrounds you in a wonderful, magical place that makes you forget about your life for 2 hours. The great thing about Unbreakable is it does none of that. Okay? That looked like a documentary. Yes, it was shot in an artsy way as well, but the fact that it's purposefully gritty, and I don't mean gritty like DC Extended Universe, everyone's from Gotham gritty. I mean gritty like they shot it like a documentary. Like they just walked, like nothing's lit, or appears lit. That nothing looked like a studio scene or anything. Looks like it was all shot on location. They just used one single camera. No special effects. Nothing going on here. As opposed to the CGI monstrosities, bright blue light in the sky, every superhero movie you've ever seen for the past 20 years. I contend to you that Unbreakable is a masterpiece in the Eric Bischoff method of making Nitro different than Raw. Take a drink, everybody. Eric Bischoff famously got out a legal pad and he wrote down everything about every aspect of Raw, and then drew a line, and then wrote out Nitro and said, "Okay, how can we be the opposite of this or different?" And I feel like M. Night Shyamalan began the writing of Unbreakable the same way. Let me take everything everybody loves about comic book movies, about comic books in general, and how can I do the opposite? Brilliant. Lobster. Your witness, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I play in a typical week at least about 10 to 20 hours of competitive Overwatch. And I have to give my counterpart credit. I have never experienced such exemplary throwing. Quite like that so-called defense of Bruce Willis. And I might add, I once played a game against an opponent who started purposely throwing himself immediately off the map and killing himself, reducing his team to a constant 6v5 throughout the entire match. And when I messaged him to point this out and just inquire as to what was going on, his only explanation was, I wanted to see just how much SR I could lose. The defense just topped that. The defense just blew that I have nothing left to live for Lucio right out of the freaking water. I would like to thank him for doing about a third of my notes job for me in terms of criticizing Bruce Willis. And that's before he even got to the admission that this movie is by no means an escape. It is a getaway into a world that attempts to mirror reality and yet is somehow even more dreary. I know quite a few people from the East Coast. I'm not sure even Philadelphia or New York or Boston are capable of looking quite as shitty as M. Night Shyamalan makes Philly look. I am just about positive. I mean, the day of the college football game, I get it. You know, it's foosball weather. But that's pretty much just a standard day in Philly. We're given and again, it's yet another example of, Mr. Glass going on and on about what a hopeless, chaotic, shitty place the world is. And yeah, it's pretty much the only place these characters exist in. Okay, even The Wire depicted the odd, pleasantly mild day every now and then. This movie just can't be arsed. And again, beats the audience over the head with its tone, with its message, with what its characters are trying to say. It's only barely discernible from what we consider a modern-day DCEU movie. All it needs is a trailer set to a kickin' classic rock soundtrack. Just, wow, I'm at an absolute loss because the defense said so much of exactly pretty much what I meant to. I will throw this out there though. My greater point was not necessarily that David should feel an immediate need to go out and do good with its powers. It's that, number one, casting aside his wife perhaps being a bit oblivious, was the fact that, no, number one, he would have noticed, or at the very least, who else would have? Absolutely any medical professional who had ever been in contact with him and had to take a basic history.
Objection. Men don't go to the doctor.
Thank you, Louis C.K. Anyway. No, speaking as someone who knows a few medical professionals, I'm the son of a former ER nurse. A number of my best friends are nurses, or have at least some medical training. I refuse to believe that someone who happened to at some point or another have a glance at a 40-something-year-old man, especially the ones who are checking him out after the train crash, would say, "You're 40 years old. You've never had so much as a boo-boo. Scratch that, let alone a boo-boo. You've never even had an owie. The hell? If you're a 40-something-year-old meatbag who has been walking around this dangerous spinning rock orbiting the sun long enough, something at some point is going to fuck you up. A dog's going to bite you. You're going to trip. You're going to step on a Lego. You're going to drop a dish in the sink and cut your finger on it." Shout out to my sister. That happened to her this weekend, and it's happened to me before. At some point, you're going to get a nick, a scrape, a bruise, something. This guy hits the point when a lot of guys his age are, buying obscenely expensive sports cars and hitting on women they're young enough to have fathered. And he's never had so much as a cough. He's never had a tickle at the back of his throat. Yeah, bullshit. You're going to notice that. But, just as importantly, as, again, the defense pointed out for me, he is entirely nonplussed the entire time by some of the ridiculous feats he's able to pull off. He just kind of goes about his everyday business, brushes it off, never says a word about any of it. This doesn't seem the slightest bit odd to him. It's just all too much to take on faith. To quote another movie, it simply raises too many questions. That's where we are. This has me quoting Batman Forever. Fuck my life. What I keep coming back to is it subverts the genre in admirable fashion. It is an impressive concept. I like it that much. It's just that it was translated to the wrong medium. This shouldn't have been episodic, so it would have made it might have made a decent TV series if you would have stretched it out far enough. Would have made an outstanding short story in the right hands. I think he could have handed this to a number of comic publishers, and it would have made a fun little graphic novel. I would have read it and enjoyed it. Hell, little side note, the special edition DVD that I own actually came with a little bit of collector's art of David and Mr. Glass, rendered by the legendary comic artist Alex Ross. And it is absolutely gorgeous. He could have done so much justice to so many of these scenes. But as a movie, you're sitting there for 106 minutes. You're waiting for conflict. You're waiting for something to instill tension. And there's just nothing. There's absolutely nothing. In fact, it's worse than nothing. There's a giant cock tease with all of this bludgeoned over the head with Triple H's sledgehammer, take a drink, foreshadowing. You know, the whole movie, we're beaten over the head with the concept again and again, right down to his ridiculous monologuing, that Glass is going to end up ultimately being the villain. And of course, that ends up being the case. But what is our grand showdown between these two? They engage in a little physical contact. All of a sudden, David engages his super spidey sense to glimpse everything, all the shenanigans that he's been up to, and then he just calls the cops. That's not a hero versus villain showdown. That makes David the equivalent to a really good neighborhood watch captain. That's as super villains go. I'm trying to think who that would even put Mr. Glass on par with in terms of easy foes to take down. We're getting into like Count Vertigo territory in terms of ease. We're talking Electrocutioner in Batman Arkham Origins. That's about how simplistic it is. He just calls the cops and off he goes. And if it hadn't been for the two sequels, that would have been the end of David Dunn versus Mr. Glass. That would have been it. Like so many movies, it's just a good idea executed poorly. And there's so little else to say except that, goddamn, we should have savored this when we had it, because we had no idea how much worse it would all get. All right, and that's it. That's Unbreakable.
I fucking hated that movie. Ugh. Dear M. Night Shyamalan, just fucking stop already. Like, I'm sorry if you like it, and that's fine. But I mean,
no, it's okay.
I really I'm like, how am I going to handle this? I really hated this thing, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to say everything I don't like about this movie is a positive.
Steal gimmick infringement. I call gimmick infringement.
I figured that's the way to defend the movie. It's just be like, you know what, I'm wrong. I'm, as Robert Winfrey has accused me of being, I'm just, a Luddite who likes, things that pop and explode and, and go boom. I'm like, you know what, that is exactly how I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna just recite everything I fucking hate about this movie and be like, that's what makes it great, and just walk away. Mic drop, boom.
I was cracking the hell up over here on the other end.
That was I figured you were on mute because I'm like, there's no way he's not laughing at this.
Oh yeah, I usually have myself on mute anyway, and tonight I did because, like I said, I'm in a little bit of discomfort. I'm making some kind of otherwise distracting noises, and also usually I'm, scribbling, occasionally talking to someone else in the background, stuff like that. But in this case, you started basically throwing, and it was the only comparison I could come up with. Is I'm like, am I living in Overwatch?
So that is our take on Unbreakable. I never want to watch another M. Night Shyamalan movie again. And if you're listening to this before you hear our Damn You Hollywood review of Glass, you haven't seen Ranting yet.
It's about the only thing that I give M. Night Shyamalan credit for is he's got quite a visual sense.
Yeah, but I don't even like it. That's the problem. Like, let me give just a little bit of Glass. His use of close-up is really artsy and interesting, and it drove me up the fucking wall. I just wanted one panoramic shot. Well, just one. It's as like he gave the camera to somebody who doesn't understand like focus, and so he just kept the whole thing on close-up the entire time, and then moved around. And I'm like, can we back up just a little bit? Do we really need to be in everyone's face? I mean, God, there's a shot he does, and it's panning, and it's literally like, and I know it's an artistic shot, I get that, but it's still, I fucking hated it. He's focusing on the opening of Unbreakable in the train derailment, and you see the woman in the blue dress coming down the aisle, and and he's panning over. And there's an empty seat in front of the camera. And it's not a quick pan, so the camera kind of just stays there for a minute. You're literally getting, in a big-budget movie, with professional filmmakers, a close-up shot of an empty seat. And then it pans over to see, to this, to behind that seat is Bruce Willis looking sad out a window. It just drives me nuts.
He's a director that has some things he does really, really well and shows signs of brilliance. It's just that it's clear that he never really develops a well-rounded toolkit.
He's definitely he's the kind of director I feel like who, like, he has a vision and he clearly has a very artistic sensibility about him, but so did George Lucas, and he too needed to be reined in. He needed editing. He needed somebody to be like, no, George, this is stupid. And I feel like that's what M. Night Shyamalan, this needs to be somebody on set going, no, stupid, back the camera up. Not everything needs to be in close-up.
It's like when someone is just learning how to do something. And it's my belief, a bit of a philosophy I've gained lately, and I've talked about this a little bit on my Facebook a few times, and it's that when you're starting off with something fresh, you try to find one thing about what you're trying to do that you instantly do really well, that you just pick up on immediately, and you focus on that. You figure out ways to maximize that while you're learning to do everything else that you struggle with. Because that way, at least you've got something you can fall back on. You've got something you can work with. With Shyamalan, it feels like sometimes the stuff he does well, he decided somewhere along the line, nope, that's all I have to do. That's all I need to learn. That's all I need to learn, and that's how I'm going to be the best there ever was at what I do.
Yeah.
When it comes to writing, he wrote a really interesting twist once, and he had the discipline to set down some interesting, somewhat subtle visual rules and stick to them, and never have anybody notice exactly what those rules were until someone pointed them out. But the problem was, he then decided he could do that with every movie that he ever made.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I was thinking, like, he gets away with hitting it out of the park with The Sixth Sense, and then it's just like, he's like one of the few filmmakers where the executives don't get involved. It's like, no, this is the one executive you need to get involved with. This is the one you need to fucking sit down and talk to this guy, because again, like, it's the Lucas issue. It's like he made Star Wars, so suddenly he gets the run on the place. It's like, nope, you need a Kurtzman or whatever his name was to kind of rein you in and give you some focus. You got lucky the first time. You're not going to get lucky every time. With that said, next month our on trial will be February 7th, and we'll be doing Pan's Labyrinth. I will be prosecuting. Sean will be defending. And I've already heard people say, what could there possibly be to prosecute about this movie? I don't know. A cute girl I work with said I should watch it, and I'm not watching anything unless I can podcast about it. So that's how it then ended up on the on-trial docket. As for what is there to prosecute it, I'm sure I'll find something. That being said, after I get back from my cruise in March 28th, we'll be doing an on-trial for Scooby-Doo, Monsters Unleashed. It's terrible, so I'm going to defend it. In April, we're going to take a break from the on trial, and instead we're going to do Long Road to Ruin, Hellboy. Both of the old Hellboy movies, the 04 and 08 sequel. So that's April, and we're doing that because of the new Hellboy reboot. In May, we are doing an on-trial and a Long Road to Ruin. We'll be doing an on-trial for the Three Musketeers. That was recommended to us by Andrew Graham. And then we'll be doing a Long Road to Ruin for the first two John Wick movies, and that's because of John Wick 3 Parabellum. Moving on to June, we'll be doing two on-trials in a row. First one will be for the Matthew Broderick Godzilla from 1998. And then the next one, X-Men 3: The Last Stand. We didn't give it nearly enough time during the Long Road to Ruin when we did this, so we're going to focus on it in June. July, we've got nothing. But we are doing August 1st. That's why. August 1st, we'll be doing Pulp Fiction. And then August 29th, we'll be doing Swamp Thing from 1982.
Sweet.
In September, we'll have Andrew Graham on the show. I might be stepping into the judge's role, and I'll be allowing Andrew Graham, I think, wants to prosecute 13 Hours. So that was a special request again by Mr. Andrew Graham from our Canadian office. In October, we'll be doing two shows again. We'll have a Long Road to Ruin from the From Dusk Till Dawn trilogy. And then on the 24th of October, we'll be doing an on-trial for the DC animated film Gotham by Gaslight. Sorry, there are three shows. I forgot this last one. We'll be doing on Halloween night, October 31st, we'll be doing the on-trial for the Keanu Reeves Constantine. It'll be Constantine week, all week long, Halloween week. That brings us to November. We'll be doing a Long Road to Ruin for the Kingsman movies, the first two, because Kingsman 3 will have presumably come out that week. And finally, we're doing a Long Road to Ruin for the Santa Claus on December 10th. And that is it for the 2019 calendar so far. We're fond of calling audible, so that's what it is on paper. Who the hell knows what we'll actually be doing? With that said, Sean, I'm going to pitch it over to you for your plugs.
All right. Well, once we sign off, in about 45-ish minutes, at about 10 p.m. Central Time, I am going to be streaming live on Twitch at twitch.tv/ComerCodex. I'm going to be playing some competitive Overwatch tonight. I got to blow off a little steam, so I'm going to go try to not flush my ranking down the toilet. Otherwise, podcasting-wise, Mark pretty much nailed just about everything. I stream a handful of times per week at the aforementioned Twitter. You can get regular updates on what I'm going to be playing and when. I'm going to be kind of quiet for the rest of the week because I am getting ready to move in with my girlfriend in about 7 days after several delays due to inclement weather in Kansas City. Speaking of which, I would like to throw out another little friendly plug. Mark, help me out here. When are you going to be reviewing Alita Battle Angel again? On, I believe it's Source Material?
The Tuesday after it comes out, which is February 15th.
Okay. I don't normally talk about Source Material because, unfortunately, I have made way too little time to be on that show, and I regret that immensely. Because I love Jesse, and I even...
Let me jump in here. Your betrothed is going to be on Damn You Hollywood.
Oh, on Damn You Hollywood. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Well, betrothed is a little bit... That tends to imply engaged. We aren't there yet, not even remotely. But yes, my girlfriend Carrie has been enlisted to be on Damn You Hollywood to talk about Alita Battle Angel, since she is a longtime anime and manga fan. So I would consider it an immense personal favor if you would all tune in and leave lots of generous feedback. This is her very first podcast. I'm stoked. I hope she has a great time. For the non-selfish reason that I like it when she's happy and I like it when she has fun, and for the entirely selfish reason that I would like to one day get her onto my stream to play some Diablo 3, and I feel like that might be a good stepping stone. So,
we'll be gentle.
I spoke nothing but highly of you and Robert. So.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Yes. Carrie, who is the assistant to Alexis Haina, who runs Honeysuckle Rose Creations, they work together in that business. Mm-hmm. She was pitched to me as an expert in the manga for Alita Battle Angel, so we'll have her on to talk about that when we review the movie. Looking forward to it. With that said, this has been another edition of On Trial. Court is now in recess, and we look forward to offending you in the future.